Right. Weather check, absolutely bucketing down here. So we've had the sun for at least 4 days. So what do you expect? So yeah, it's throwing it. It's Monday. It's what day? Wednesday morning, and it's throwing it out of rain. So still, there's portraits to be done. Yeah, this is interesting because from the weekend. So I've done that was Sunday. Right? Can you see that? Right. There's a certain kind of execution, if you like. The light shine on it, if you know what I mean. It's very controlled. And then came, I think there was a couple on Monday. This might have been one of the Monday ones. And again, it's difficult to sort of see. You see, there's a kind of the mark making has. I can't get too close. Has got. There's a kind of a evolution, if you like, of, well, not evolution, because I'll probably revert back to the more accurate, more controlled, but still, it's there's a difference, if you like. And then there was another one yesterday afternoon, and then again, this is probably like the one I've just shown you. I ought to get a lens that can zoom in and out on it. It's got a fixed lens on it, so I can't zoom in and out. But nevertheless, you can probably see, if you look at my Instagram, you can see the differences in mark making. And the people practice, don't they? They practice making marks or making marks with charcoal in different ways, and you can create tone this way and that way. And I think there's another one as well that's done. When was this one done? This was probably done yesterday as well. So that one, which again, that's probably sort of a more controlled thing, and much more delicate in places. And I've always had this thing. You hear me talk about the response thing. The basic premise that I bang on about, which is you have a response to somebody, regardless of what you make the portrait. But you have a response to somebody, and it's that fuels whatever it is or sparks whatever it is that you're about to do. And I think that it's a lot more than just an emotional response and it makes you feel a certain way or whatever. I think it's more than that. I think that then becomes the mark making. So that the marks are, they embody that emotional response. And that, I think, is what's going on with all these different kind of executions. I think that's what's happening. I think the somehow, I think you only if you let it. I don't think you can. It just got me thinking that you have this emotional response to somebody, and it's not about you want to draw them. It's about channeling that response. But imagine if I have this emotional response to somebody, and then I then break it down into, I'm going to treat it like this, and I'll treat it like that. Imagine what happens there. Is that a wasted opportunity? Is it not better just to say, well, let's go with that that feeling that you have, and I always think of it in terms of when people talk about this, or when we have this discussion, that when you draw somebody that's smiling and you start smiling when you're drawing them, that kind of thing. I always think that that's some kind of connection that you're making with the subject's emotion. I mean, it's a simple thing, but I mean, I can imagine that would be a good way to illustrate what's actually happening. That it is you are making an emotional response, an emotional connection with that person. So then you get to a point where, well, I'm going to treat the hair this way and treat the the eyelashes this way or whatever, because that's how you think it should be, because you've got this sort of idea that it's a mechanical process, and what happens then, it all becomes kind of diluted by this. I'm going to have to change the aperture on this. Can you see it's burning out? I changed the aperture thinking it might be wrong way. Hold on a minute. There. So, right, let me just show the others. Now we've got, I changed it thinking that it would be brighter, but it's not really helped, has it? So that's, there you go. That's Sundays. And then, which is, as I say, it's very kind of controlled and not, it's delicate and all the rest of it, because that's the subject. That's you can see the emotion in that subject. So it needed that treatment. It's my emotional response to it. And consequently, the marks and the way I treated the charcoal and everything else changed. This is quite a similar subject, if you like, in that, she's very thoughtful and in another place by the looks of her face. But that then had even with the delicateness of that pose, there is still much more fluidity and spontaneity in the mark making. So obviously there are other factors, this thing about wanting to work quick because you connect with the subject, and consequently it's a breathtaking event. So you're in a bit of a rush, but not for the reasons that everybody else says, do it against the clock and all that. Not that, but it's because you're excited and motivated and engaged. It tends to be a much quicker event. So that can have a bearing on the mark making. And as I said with yesterday's, because it was all these were changing as I was, from Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. All these were changing and having a different. And I noticed it on Instagram, and I looked through them all. I mean, Instagram's crap because it just burns out all the subtleties. You end up with it just, you don't get the midtones and everything else. And so charcoal on Instagram is a nightmare. It never shows it. It looks better on here, and this is going through a video. So it's this kind of fluctuation that interested me in the mark making. I'm not conscious of the mark making. I am conscious of doing something to capture what I'm drawing. It's like as I'm looking at it, because I was interested with that one. I was doing it yesterday, and I was initially trying to draw the eye, but eventually stopped, trying to draw the eye, and just reverted back to shapes and tone. And it's always the way. Shapes and tones always the way. If you start trying to draw something, you end up put outlines around things, and they end up colouring it in, and and bang goes or any kind of responsive action. So it's just at that point, it's just production. So, and I can't abide it being just production. And I'm always conscious of that, it being just production, following going through the motions and not really listening, if you know what I mean. I gave you that analogy years ago when I played guitar, and years ago, I was playing with someone, and I said to them at the time, when you play, do you listen to what you're playing, or is it just going through the motions, And it was that was one of the quite kind of another epiphany. I know I had one on Sunday, but there's another one, but that I had many years ago. But it's that I don't want to get into a position where it is just that. It's just the production side of things. I want I want you to be able to feel the emotion in the marks that I make, not just in the final portrait. I think this sort of cumulative effect thing, whereby if the marks have got life in them, this is what you've ever said many times. If the marks have got life in them, then chances are the portrait will as well. And that is something that fascinated me. And when I looked at the which is a bit of a strong word, I suppose, but it did interest me, so we say, when I looked at the Instagram and my Instagram this morning, and I thought that's something to be aware of. I think that I mean, I bang on about the responsive approach, but I think that if it isn't a response to the person, the subject, the world, whatever it is you're creating, what is it? Is it just the application of a skill that you acquired? Is it that? It is, I suppose it isn't it. I think that's probably what most people would do anyway, just to apply a skill that they've acquired. But the thing about skill, and this is the other side, the kind of the counter to that, is that skill is something that you acquire in the pursuit of something else. Soccer, football. You acquire the skill to control the ball in order to avoid people taking it off you, and primarily to score a goal. I'm sure people acquire skills prior to that endeavor, but I bet any money their first start is I'm going to score a goal regardless, and they develop the skills accordingly. So I'm going to connect with this subject and or many subjects, and my skills will grow accordingly. So response drives my evolution, my skill, if you like. It drives that. But I'm never really conscious of a skill. I'm never really conscious of this is, my skill. I'm always more conscious of the not being aware of it. I think that's probably not being aware of what's happening, not being aware of if I do this, this will happen. That kind of thing. Because that's because I don't really have that mindset. I don't have the mindset that will allow me to consider warm or cold colours, for instance, or and the manipulation of them to create a certain effect. I don't really have that kind of mindset. My mindset says, I see, I do. That's how I work. It's like in this instance, I don't think it works with everything else, but if I do, if I see that and my response is to that thing I see, that's about as technical as I can get. I can't really get into a point where I know what's happening. I know that the lines or marks or whatever in a certain direction will do this, and a certain amount of pressure will do that. I can't feel any of that happening. I can only feel, and this is why I suppose I'm quite specific about the charcoal, because it's that is mostly that I'm considering. It's the what the charcoal was doing is probably more at the time I'm doing it. It's probably more my focus and really any kind of consideration of a application of a skill or a technique isn't really any kind of near the forefront of my thinking. I think one of the things is that I'm probably, as these, as I do so many, I'm probably acquiring these skills and applying these skills unconsciously. Doing the things that I'm doing. I sort of, I'm saying working on the eye there, and I'm looking for darker areas. To verbalize it is not the right thing to do, but essentially that is what I'm thinking about. I'm just thinking about the general focus of all the elements and how these elements are being communicated via the various kind of marks, and the marks are not necessarily, I say, any kind of deliberation. They're just me making marks to achieve a particular thing. So, as I said, I'm interested by that, and how much of that is, as I said just now, the consequence of all the portraits I've done, and then it's become a habit, and so on and so forth. So it's probably a result of the number of portraits. So as one chap said on the and you might be watching this about it feels it needs to have a go. Just beware of the this is how you should charcoal. You should use charcoal kind of instruction. You know, the videos that tell you that you should use it in a certain way, because I think one of the main things about charcoal for me is that it tends to be a more connected medium. You know, it does respond to your emotional directive more than because, you know, from the pressure, the way you start your marks, you know, the attack, the velocity stuff, it all manifests in charcoal, providing the charcoal is a good charcoal, but it does manifest in the charcoal. So just be aware that that's the case. Don't go thinking that you're going to do it exactly like someone else, like me or like anybody else, because if you do it this way, that's what's going to happen. Don't think of it like that. Otherwise, you will struggle with charcoal. You'll struggle with charcoal because it's not good charcoal. You'll struggle with charcoal because it's not good paper. You know, there's all kinds of reasons why you struggle with charcoal. But the most important one is that if you don't let it act as a conduit for your response, I think that's probably the most important thing about charcoal. I think it's probably the same of drawing, but you know, with graphite. But the thing about, I was thinking about, someone mentioned about ballpoint pen, and yeah, I probably could draw in anything. But what I like about charcoal is this the substance. You know, it becomes a thing without a lot of effort. You know, you can create shapes and tones and of substance, of scale, and it takes a long time to get to that point when you're using mediums like, you know, graphite or ballpoint pens or colored pencils. You have to work at it to get the level of substance, the level of density of information. With charcoal, you're straight into dark tones. You're straight into the definition of things very easily, because and without any effort. You know, it's sort of well, the effort probably is the pure response thing. You know, as you get, I suppose you get more experience, and then you'll recognize these things. You know, this thing of which is the gestural thing. You know, the way people will draw with gesture, and they'll start with very faint lines, and then when they're secure in a particular location or something, it becomes a darker line and all that sort of thing, which is just a technique that people have you know, learned, and but those are the things that you would learn if you were, you know, starting out with the right mindset, I think. And that's the other thing as well. But yeah, it's just interesting. I mean, not like this is sort of developed into it, because this is it's a very dark, because of this, you know, the dark chin and the side of his face is very dark, and the hair and all the rest of it. It's all very dark. So this is developed into that kind of thing. So you know, that kind of, so it reflects in the execution, the darkness of it all. But I think the one thing that and because I see it all the time with the the domestic ads and all that sort of thing about this is how to use charcoal and whatever, and then they show you how to put it on with a brush and how to blow it around and all kinds of things, push it around and all that, and it just, for me, immediately then puts it into the realms of illustration, because I don't know whether or not being conscious of what you're doing is fully conscious of what you're doing is an indication of an illustration or or art. And there's no doubt that it's an artistic endeavor, a creative endeavor, but whether or not it's what you'd consider art, I don't know. I think anything that revolves around a process runs a risk of not being art, because it's production. It's always going to be production because it has a process. It's what they refer to as manufacturing. It's a process, manufacturing process. So anything that revolves around that, whether it's your mark making or whether it's the way you initially approach it, and preparing the thing before you start colouring it in and all that kind of thing. Anything that resembles that for me is production. So it's a bit like when I was talking about not planning. I think it's a little bit like that. The nearest I get to planning it is making sure I've got the right paper, and the charcoal. So but that's about as near as I get. So and then obviously the response then becomes paramount, because that's really what I'm trying to do, is a response to. So the focus is purely on that response and not on the preparation to produce, that kind of thing. And I think mark making probably falls into that preparation to produce thing. And even down to preliminary sketches, that kind of thing. Another thing that I can't get on with. I can't get on with the idea that you're prepared to draw something. Oh, sorry, you preliminary draw something in order to draw something. It's just that I because of the response, it's all back to this response, because it's a responsive thing for me. If I'm responding to it once, then that's the right time to be capturing the essence. Not when I've done it 3 or 4 times and now I'm ready to do it properly. I don't. I can't do that. I can't do initial sketches. I can do one sketch. I can do one portrait. I can do one painting. Initial sketches for me is really difficult. It always has been like that. I've never been able to sort of draw the same thing over and over and over again. It just doesn't work for me. I mean, it works for most people, I'm sure, and you'll see lots of experts that do it. But for me, the first time I draw this face is the last time I draw this face. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a flaw in that, if it's a luxury, if it's me being unprofessional or whatever people will call me for doing that. But it's just a thing. And if I think back, I've always had that. I've always done that. Even when I used to do the illustrations for work when I worked at Plumtree Studios, and I went through. We'd use animated characters or caricatures for certain pet food products or whatever. And of course, we all worked on layout paper, so you draw over and over and over and over again, and tracing through every time, get refining it and tracing it. And partly that was to do with working in pen and ink. So you draw it in pencil, and then, rather than drawing it in pencil and then working over it and then rubbing out the pencil, I used to draw it in pencil on a sheet of layout paper, and you could then trace through. It wasn't like tracing paper, but it was pretty good for, you put it on a light box and work through it. So that was, and I'd spend hours refining. And I remember at the time how frustrating it was. It was quite a dangerous thing because your first sketches, your first caricatures, you know, those that I've shown you before, these if I can find them, this kind of thing. So this kind of thing, again, I'm not sure you. I'd spend hours. You can see how tiny they're. Like most of it's done with a fine liner rotring, you know, those things you shake. But imagine the number of draws, the times I draw that and over to get every one of the characters, and the parrot and the cat and Robin Day and the dog, you know, that all of those things, that's tedious. You know, you talk, for me, this, and there was no way that that's a sort of spontaneous feeling about it. It's never going to work. When I did the fashion things, we used to do a fashion clients as well. So I used to do fashion in the style of this famous guy. So there was an element of fashion spontaneity in it because of this kid's style. This is the thing about illustrators back in the day. We used to copy styles because we couldn't afford, you know, the client couldn't afford the real thing. So it was my job to create something in the style of. And but like I say, it's probably, that's probably one of the reasons why I don't want to prepare to draw. If it's you know, how it should be or not, I'm not sure. I think that's probably partly me, but you know, people will say, "Oh, it's the first sketch that or the first time I painted it or whatever. It's always got more life in it." People say that, so there's got to be something in that. So if that life is the initial response to somebody, then perhaps there is something in it. But I think you've got to be aware of the response. You know, it's got to be if that's the preparation part of it, you know, you understand that your response to somebody is what's going to drive what you're about to do. So, as I said, it's just interesting how all that manifests in the overall effect, the overall outcome that there is a visible element to it. It's visibly different because of the and then when I was thinking about it, I thought, well, surely it should be. You know, every face is going to be different. Every personality is going to be different. Surely, then that would say that the outcome should feel different. You know, it should be painted in a different way. And then you got into this, it's not your style kind of thing, and people attach themselves to a style. So it gets like the guy said the other day, Danny said the other day, that it gets complicated, and I immediately said to him, no, it's not, because I don't think that the whole point of this is that it's not complicated, that it is just a human response, and whether or not you've got the skills, like the chap saying, whether you got the skills in the first place is irrelevant. The motivation to do it is what's relevant. Your skills, you will get your skills just like your skills will develop just as your style will manifest. It's not an important bit, even though it's probably the most important bit to most people. It's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that you do it, and you don't stop doing it, and you always love what you do. That's another sort of must have. You've got to enjoy it. You've got to enjoy doing it and then enjoy it. So regardless, not whether or not it's good enough for somebody else or whether it's good enough for you in terms of a sort of comparative thing, you've got to be it's part of, if you don't love what you do, then you won't carry on doing what you do. And that's the thing, because you might carry on, but you might carry on in the wrong direction. One of the terrible things about, well, it's not terrible, but one of the bad things about, having the mindset that compares, is that you look for answers, and often those answers, for why you think it's failed, and often those answers are based in knowledge, and that's the wrong route to take. So my mark making is this, or I have this effect, or I have this particular issue, whether it be to do with the size of the nose, or how noses are drawn, or the position of things, or whatever it might be. There's a particular issue, and you'll think it's a knowledge issue. You'll think it's the reason why you can't do it is because you don't know this thing, and that then all becomes a different journey, and not a good one sometimes. If you're having a go at this for the first time, you want to have a go at charcoal. Have a go at charcoal, but don't judge your outcome based on comparison or an expectation. Just tell you what it is. Chances are, in the early stages with charcoal, it's just about the fun of getting your hands dirty or whatever. It's just about the fun of doing it, the joy of doing it, and that in itself, there's the value right there. If that happens to you, if that's what you feel when you first experience charcoal, then you've done it right. That's end of. Whether or not somebody says it looks good or it doesn't look good or whatever, you've done it right. But the thing about it is that not to think of it as a production, in the first place. Not to think of it as a drawing. That's a big thing. Not to think of it as art, because it's certainly, and for most cases, it isn't art, and somebody else might designate it as art, but it's not art. It's something that, and I dare say it is something much more valuable to you than whether or not it's art, because this is back to the human need to create, to express, that kind of thing. So, and that's the value in that. Can't be underestimated. It's not it's nothing to do with mark making or the creation of art. As I say, it's far more, from your point of view, this is far more valuable. But when it happens, when things start to come together, and I think that the assessment of that is another questionable thing, because you'll question it as being a successful outcome would be that it looks like the subject, but it's not always the right way to assess it. It can be many things. It can be the fact that certain parts of it. Now I have this thing where certain parts of a drawing can be really, really in the moment. Some of those on that, not this one, not yesterday, not that one, the one before it. Some of the marks on that, I'm just over the moon with. For no, I don't understand why. I don't want to understand why, but I do like the way that the thing manifest. I do like the way that became, for whatever reason, whatever twitch or drag or whatever it is that I'm doing. I do like certain parts of it. So for me, that's another plus point. So there's all kinds of things at play that decide on whether or not you've made a great portrait. I mean, we're still just talking about making, drawing somebody's face. So there is that kind of thing as well. There's still the does it look like the person? Does it look like a subject kind of assessment? Sometimes it's not that important. I know it sounds a bit silly, but it's not that important. Sometimes it's more about whether it feels like that person, and consequently, that's where the mark making aspect of it is probably a big factor in that, because the mark making can be the bit that contains the bit that the essence, the bit that is the essence of that individual. So I'm it's a strange thing. I think the idea that marks are in themselves containing the essence of the subject just seems to be, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like something you'd say. It seems a bit off the wall, kind of crazy, because it's surely it's the the cumulative, which it is, cumulative effect. But why would some of the marks embody the person, the subject? And I suppose it would, because if I'm saying that this is an emotional response, then as I'm hitting the charcoals, I'm putting these marks down. They are literally my emotional response is right there, and I know I'm chasing it to make it look like the subject, and that is inevitable. But as I'm doing that, every sort of tone or direction of mark that I'm making, as I adjust the levels, they're all embodying this character, So in a way, it makes sense to follow a more responsive approach to mark making. But that's it. As I said, I was intrigued that there was this fluctuation, and I'm also pleased that it does have the fluctuation. I want it to have fluctuation. I think I want it because it means that I'm doing it right. From my point of view, I'm doing it right. I don't want it to be the same every time. You can probably tell my drawings. It's inevitable. It's the style finder thing. But apart from that, I'm pleased that there is some kind of variation in the execution, which is more to do, as I said, with the my response. So my response begins when I find the reference. My response begins then. So when I've found the reference, then it becomes about how how I connect with it, how I feel about it. I tend to before I start drawing, I look at a face and imagine this individual, trying to connect to this individual. Sometimes I do. You'll see me sort of do this on the paper, and that's partly to figure out where it's going to end up, roughly, and it's partly to do with this connecting moment, those early stages when I'm just connecting with this guy that looks like an actor from Goodfellas, So I think it's the suit that does that now, and it looks like he's Italian as well. So, but right there, you see, I've already made this visual assessment, and I'm connecting to that spirit, and I'm wanting it to feel. I mean, there's the densities and the tones and everything else that I'm conscious of, but essentially, I'm still in that who is this guy, what's he about kind of phase, and that is driving a lot of what I'm doing. But yeah, I think I'm as I do more of these, I get less and less concerned with the how the lines and the tones are appearing, because sometimes I'll use my fingers to rub it around, and you get some kind of dappling of tone there, and sometimes the charcoal breaks up, or there's a flaw in the paper and all that kind of thing, and I'm getting less and less concerned with that, because it just still adds to the character, and it may add to the texture of the tone that I'm trying to create, and whether or not there is a the lines are a particular way, or if there's a breakup of, sort of tone that's not your typical way of breaking it up. It's just sort of a few lines and things. I don't care. so I don't know where that's coming from. I can feel that is happening. That's manifesting in what I'm doing. But when I first started, if you look at some of the early ones, which were complete like explosions of marks, I thought I was freer then. But I think the concentration then of my mark making was to be as free as, and responsive as possible, and I was conscious of that. But now I'm not. I'm not even trying to make the tones look sort of blended or smooth or applied in a certain way. I'm not even trying to do that. I'm just trying to. I can see that on these earprints, I can see there's levels of tone, and I can see there's this weird shape there, and all the rest of it. But I'm not really doing anything other than following what I see. It's not a it's not as conscious as it once was, which that's another thing that concerns me as well. I'm getting a bit of a habitual creature. I don't really want that either. So I think once I start doing it through habit, then I'm into production and I'm just knocking them out. So I don't want that either. So, which is why I suppose I have these resets every now. You see me do the resets when I do lots and lots of quick starts, which is me just resetting the my approach, I suppose, my way of doing it. I think that is an important thing. The other thing about the resets is doing the resets is that, when you get bogged down with doing it, and it's like, especially when people spend weeks on things. I know hours and hours of work they'll spend, on a portrait, and I just think that, there must come a point where you've got to metaphorically clean the brush. You know what I mean? So I do that with the quick starts, the resets, what they call them. I do that too, and you saw the one I did the other day I did 6 resets, sort of quick starts, just because that's my way of removing the overworking focus thing. It needs to be exact. I think that's probably one of the when I was saying about let me show you on this girl from the other day. I think it was that one. It was one. It might be. No, I think she's gone into the files. But it's things like this and the eye, and you can see it on that one as well, whereby this is getting there. It's starting to do it. I don't know if you can see that, but it gets to a point where the edges of things become irrelevant, and it's all about the shape and the subtleties of tone, mainly through me touching it and pushing it and tweaking it, and then checking the shapes and all the rest of it. But you get lines, things that happen that are out of any kind of conscious deliberation. They're just happening things, and when they're happening because it's my response to it. It's my connection to that, to the response to it. I think that's probably for me, that's the best bit. When the marks happen without really too much deliberation. I think that's the thing for me. I think that one of the assessments, we talked about the King Charles thing the other day, and one of the assessments, as I said before, is that for me, if a portrait works, it works because it's honest and pure, and it has. Somebody said a portrait should never contain the artist. It's never about the artist. I think it's everything about the artist. Primarily, the artist's ability to connect with another human is what it's about. But I think that happens the more you connect. The more you connect with a subject, the more likely it is to have this pure response thing. And then when that manifests in the portrait, then you know you've done a good portrait. You know that it's a portrait of worth, regardless of whether or not you've applied the marks in a certain way, or whether or not you've managed the paint in a certain way, or whether you know it's warm or cold paint and colours or whatever. It's irrelevant. That if that was relevant, there'd be a billion great masters all over the world, because it can be taught. It's just a matter of practice. You see it all the time. Practice and knowledge. I don't think art is practice and knowledge. I think art is making art. That's it. It's just art is making art. It's not a creative expression, shall we say, and then somebody else designates it as art. But if we want to designate, I would think that it's probably a lot more likely that if you can attain that pure response, and it'll be down to whether or not, I would imagine, what kind of person you are. If you're not the kind of person that connects well with others and struggles to communicate and all the rest of it, because you live in a dark room, then perhaps making portraits is not for you. But the ability to connect with other people, that's got to be the number one reason why your portraits are successful, because you can connect to another soul. And that's I think that's the secret to making great portraits. If you can do that, if you can sorry, I'm holding my breath. If you can empathize, because that's the thing. And if we're gonna make a portrait of somebody, you're gonna empathize with them. That's the reason why people talk about working from life, and then they go and just let the model sit there, or statuesque, and then because I think if you were working from life, particularly with a portrait, you should get to know the subject. You should talk to them, and probably talk to them during the process as well. Because the more you know about them, the more successful the portrait will be, which is a big problem when you're working from photographs. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but someone asked me to do a kind of family portrait thing. It's not my thing, but I'll do it. As I always say about portraits, I'll do commissions if you let me take control of the sitting, if you like, and the poses and the lighting and everything else, and that's fine. So I will do that, and I will take photographs of the family, because they've got kids and there's no way they're sitting still. So but I'll get to know the family, and that will be what feeds my response. So my emotional response to the family. So I already know the guy, the father, and he's a great fella. So I've already got that information. So, but I just need the information of the family. But I'll do that. I'll always do that. I mean, if someone asked me, I'd always make a portrait, but I'd never, or take a commission, but I'd never just work from someone else's photographs. I couldn't do it. Bearing in mind what I've just been rambling on about, I can't do it if I can't connect to that person and respond to them emotionally. I'm not going to be able to do a great portrait, am I? So yeah. But going back to the marks thing, I think that there are looking at some of the others that I've done, there seem to be varying levels of mark making throughout the drawing. It's partly to do with the manipulation of the tones, which is what's happening now. But I'm still drawing, because I'm still pushing things around, because they're not quite in the right place. But in the early stages, it's more about exactly that, the position of things. In the latter stages, it's more about the colour of things, or the tone of things. And how you do it varies. In the early stages, I say it's a bit, for me, it's a bit of a roller coaster kind of response thing, almost out of control, because it's it's not meant to be in control at the early stages, and then it becomes more in control as you go through the drawing. And inevitably the marks are going to change. So the way that I'm seeing the tones, and the way I'm trying to manipulate the tones, and the way I'm trying to add a little more tone or take a little more tone off it, to kill the tones. These effects are all changing, and as I said, this is what I'm seeing in the drawings that I'm doing, that there are visible differences that I can see that's happening. I'm going to have to fix that, because the problem is I've got grease on my this is the sponge on the stick, by the way. I've got grease on my finger, and it's not a good idea to start touching the paper when you've got grease on the finger. So let me just fix this charcoal. Lots of charcoal made at the moment. Tried this stuff. I told you this. Tried this stuff the other day, and it's good. It's good. If you're going to buy any, buy that. As I said the other day, it's MIYA from I got it off eBay, so I have no way. It's got Chinese writing on it, so I assume it's from China. But yeah, it's good stuff. That not as good as this, but it's good stuff. And if you're going to try charcoal, get some of that, and then get lots of different kinds of paper. I'm still in the cheap cartridge realms at the moment, but hopefully soon I'll be getting stuff from Great Art, which is just in pads, and I won't have to. I mean, this has been great, this paper, but I'm just fed up now of it being damaged. Every fourth sheet is damaged, and so I must have thrown away. Well, I have thrown away a quarter of what I bought, and it's no longer cheap, so it doesn't justify throwing it away. But hopefully, I say the other stuff will be. But this is it. I mean, I only found that as a chance thing, experiment thing. So whatever you do, make sure that that's what you do. You do try different papers. People will tell you about papers and what you need to do. And most of the people that will tell you will be technicians. So it'll be, to work the charcoal at various levels, and the paper will have to take some work and all that, which graphite people do. They will have to take some hammer and all the rest of it. They'll recommend Bristol or something, Strathmore or whatever, because it's a technical reason for choosing. Now I'm more of a. It is technical in that it's how the charcoal and the paper work together, and whether they can reach densities and so on and so forth. But that's the level of technicality. It's not to do with the marks are workable or they're better or the usual sort of technical excuses. This is not why I choose to use this, but it is down to the combination of the two. It's always going to be that. So don't just think that get some charcoal, have a go is the motives, but you just make sure that you've got plenty of different papers and different kinds of charcoal as well. So, but anyway, so it's there or thereabouts. I'm just going to tweak things, tweak the lips, knock the tone back there, for instance, and bring the lip in a little bit. Just looking at the alignments not being quite right, and those kind of alignments there. I can fix all that. Knock the tones back a bit. Just sort of general stuff. But the point of the video really was this mark making thing and how it fluctuates, and not to try to force it to always be the same, to allow it to fluctuate, to allow it to be different. I think if it is different, then you're doing something right. If it's not different, then you're probably getting into a production mindset and not a artistic response mindset. And it's not that it's a problem to have a production mindset. I don't think it is. I think that's probably how people will want to work, because they get a definite outcome, and it meets criteria, whether it's someone else's or yours. So, but I just think that portraits should always be response. It's just a personal thing, I suppose, but that's how it should be for me. Other than that, it's I'm back in the illustration mode again, and I don't want to be there. I don't want to be an illustrator again. I want to be, even though sometimes these are a little bit illustrative, but no, I don't want to go back to that. I'd rather run the risk. The thing about the response thing as well is that, and I suffer this more so when I do these, is that sometimes you can drop connection. It's a bit like Wi-Fi. You can drop connection with a subject, and when you drop the connection, things can go awry. So, but that's the nature of a responsive approach. It's going to always be like that. You can't keep the connection open permanently. There are things that drift in, especially when you're coming from a production sort of background, because there are points when you're doing things that you will be considered the production, and that will interfere with the response, your responsive connection, and because all of a sudden you're focusing on a stroke or a tone or a line or whatever, and early on that's not a good idea. Later on you can focus on those sort of things. When you're into the drawing you can do those sort of things, but early on focusing on production issues will interrupt your response, your connection, but ultimately affect the outcome. This thing where you see people have just sort of focused on they've just focused on the eye, and they've spent forever on this eye, and it's perfect, and it's all that, and and the iris is right, and all that sort of thing, and then the rest of the drawing's a bit wonky. But that's it, because their initial response and connection and response to the subject has been overridden by the production of it, and they've just not followed through. They haven't actually. They may have begun with a good connection, and the marks were there, and they were pure, and all the rest of it. But as they work through it, and production takes it over, they lose the connection, and then you can see that in a drawing. You can see that when it happens. But anyway, as I said, it was just something I thought I should talk about in terms of the mark making side of things, and how the marks and the tones and all the rest of it are relative to your response. Right, I love you, leave you, and I'll catch you in the next one.